At my mother-in-law's Thanksgiving dinner at Millbrook Manor, my place setting was missing. My husband Derek shrugged casually, "Oh, we're doing a smaller gathering this year," as 17 family members stared at me in uncomfortable silence. I smiled calmly and said, "I understand completely," then walked out carrying the one dish I'd brought. 2 hours later, they discovered I'd canceled their entire catered feast, shut down their kitchen equipment, and replaced their traditional meal with a very different kind of surprise.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh.
Their horrified expressions when they opened those delivery boxes made every moment of planning worth it. Smaller gathering echoed in my mind as I stood in the Morrison family's grand dining room, watching 17 pairs of eyes avoid my gaze. The mahogany table that had seated 20 plus for 4 Thanksgivings suddenly seemed impossibly small, despite being the same massive antique. "I understand completely," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Vivian Morrison sat at the head like a queen, her satisfied smile tugging at perfectly painted lips. Derek didn't bother standing from his seat between his mother and sister. "Maya, don't be dramatic," Derek said. "We just thought it would be nice to keep things intimate this year, family only." Family only? After 4 years of marriage, countless holidays proving my worth, I was still not family. Stephanie Morrison Blake cleared her throat. "Perhaps Maya could take her dish to go. We already have so much food prepared." I surveyed the room methodically. Harold studied his hands intently. Carter whispered to his wife Nicole. Patricia and Robert Wells exchanged knowing glances. Their daughter Madison smirked openly. Tyler Morrison had his phone out, documenting this moment. 17 people. 17 family members who had planned this, discussed it, agreed to it. They had watched me spend weeks asking what I could bring, how I could help, all while knowing there would be no place for me. "You're absolutely right. This should be family only," I said, turning toward the kitchen where my purse waited. Behind me, chairs scraped as the family settled in. Someone laughed. Madison, I thought. In the kitchen, I retrieved my purse and sweet potato casserole, sitting next to the massive spread of catered dishes. Every item had been prepared by Rosa Delacroix Company, my business partner and closest friend for 6 years. Walking back through the dining room, conversations shifted to whispered commentary meant to be overheard. "She's being so sensitive," from Stephanie. "This is exactly why we needed to make a change," from Vivian. I paused at the doorway, looking back at the Norman Rockwell scene. Golden light, autumn decorations, perfect backdrop, all designed with my input, crafted with my expertise, executed with my connections. Everything except a place for me. "Enjoy your family dinner," I said, loud enough for all to hear. "I hope it's exactly what you've been planning for." Derek finally stood. "Maya, wait, let's talk about this privately." But I was already moving toward the door, heels clicking with measured pace. Behind me, Vivian's voice rose. "I think we should proceed as planned. No need to let this disruption spoil our evening." At my car, I carefully placed my casserole on the passenger seat, then pulled out my phone. Rosa answered on the second ring. "Maya, how's your Thanksgiving going?" "Rosa, I need you to execute that contingency plan we discussed, all of it, right now." "Are you sure? Once I make these calls, there's no undoing it." I looked back at Millbrook Manor, windows glowing warmly. Inside, 17 family members were settling in for traditional Thanksgiving, unaware their entire meal existed at my discretion. "I'm absolutely certain. Execute everything. I want them to understand exactly what family loyalty looks like." My name is Maya Morrison, though 4 years ago I was Maya Sinclair, founder of Artisan Table Styling, one of Chicago's most exclusive culinary consulting firms. I built my reputation one perfectly plated dinner at a time, understanding the psychology of presentation, how a perfectly arranged table could communicate belonging. I started with a culinary arts degree from Kendall College and a borrowed camera. My first client paid $50 for a dinner party for 8. By the time I met Derek Morrison, I was commanding five-figure fees and had a 6-month waiting list. My portfolio included James Beard Award winners, Food Network shows, and the mayor's inaugural dinner.
Growing up as the daughter of a single mother who cleaned houses in Lake Forest, I'd observed wealthy families from service kitchens, studying their rituals with anthropological intensity. I learned belonging wasn't just about presence, it was about intentional inclusion. This became my mission. Every guest should feel they have a place at the table. My expertise made me indispensable to Chicago's social scene. I crafted experiences that told stories: a tech CEO's futuristic feast, a philanthropist's garden gala that doubled expected donations, a father's sophisticated Sweet 16 that made his daughter feel special rather than displayed. The Morrison and Associates emergency request should have been a warning. Their usual planner had fallen through last minute. My assistant Zara forwarded it with a note: "Big budget, bigger headache. You sure you want this?" I created an atmosphere both prestigious and accessible for their client appreciation event at the Chicago History Museum. Truffle mac and cheese and cast iron skillets, Wagyu sliders, craft cocktails in vintage glassware. Derek found me directing dessert plating in the kitchen. "You're the magician behind all this," he said, watching me coordinate chocolate lava cakes. "My mother has been asking who organized everything." That should have been my first warning. Clients hired me directly. When someone else controlled the hiring conversation, they usually wanted to control the entire relationship. Our romance developed over 6 months of professional collaborations. Morrison family events became regular features: holiday parties, charity fundraisers, celebration dinners. Each was an opportunity to prove myself worthy, though I didn't recognize the audition process. Derek pursued me with focused intensity: weekly flowers with handwritten notes referencing our conversations, impossible dinner reservations appearing casually. When I mentioned loving vintage jewelry, he surprised me with a 1940s Art Deco bracelet that supposedly belonged to his grandmother. I found out later he'd bought it at an estate sale the day after our conversation. The proposal came 11 months later at Alinia's private dining room, where we'd had our first official date. Kneeling among custom dishes from each previous date, presenting his great-grandmother's emerald-cut diamond, the evening felt like a fairy tale culmination. "Maya Sinclair, you've transformed every room you've entered in my life. Will you marry me and make this transformation permanent?" I said yes through tears, overwhelmed by apparent thoughtfulness. Later, I discovered Derek had enlisted Stephanie to befriend my assistant Zara, who innocently provided my ring size and detailed information about my preferences, insecurities, and schedule. The entire courtship had been a corporate acquisition, with strategic planning, input from multiple sources, and carefully orchestrated campaign. But surrounded by Alinia's soft lighting and innovative cuisine, I felt only gratitude for finding someone who seemed to understand every aspect of who I was. I had no idea I was celebrating my own expertly designed capture. Derek's strategic courtship began with the business lunch that became our first real conversation. "Where's your mother?" I asked when I arrived at the Publican to find Derek alone with champagne. "She'll join us later," he replied smoothly. "I thought we could discuss preliminary details first." Vivian never appeared. Instead, Derek and I spent 2 hours discussing everything except event planning. When I mentioned my mother's house cleaning work, expecting the usual awkward silence, Derek surprised me. "That must have given you incredible insight into how different families function. I bet that's part of what makes you so good at reading a room." It was exactly the right response, validating without patronizing, connecting my background to professional success. I should have wondered how he knew to thread that needle so perfectly. Our second meeting was at Morrison and Associates, leather and mahogany speaking of old money. Derek's office balanced tradition with modernity: sleek laptop beside antique inkwell, contemporary art next to family portraits. "I have a confession," he said after 20 minutes of event discussion. "The charity event isn't until spring. I used it as an excuse to see you again." His honesty felt refreshing. Our first official date at Girl and the Goat, somehow he'd secured the impossible chef's counter reservation. "How did you manage this?" I asked. I may have mentioned I was trying to impress someone who might appreciate the artistry. The courtship felt like romantic mastery, though I didn't recognize the strategy. Derek intuited my love language: thoughtful attention to detail,
When I mentioned vintage jewelry, he brought a 1920s bracelet for our 1-month anniversary.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
When I confessed intimidation about wine pairings, he arranged private tastings with a sommelier friend. Each gesture felt perfectly calibrated to my insecurities and aspirations. He made me feel sophisticated without highlighting my background, successful without diminishing achievements, beautiful without reduction to appearance. Integration into his world happened gradually through events: the charity fundraiser, Harold's birthday, Easter brunch. Each was opportunity to prove worth, though success metrics remained mysteriously vague. Vivian's feedback was always double-edged. The arrangements were lovely, dear, though perhaps too colorful for the season. The menu was ambitious, Maya, though several guests seemed confused by unusual offerings. Derek positioned himself as my champion. Mother, the Thorntons specifically asked for Maya's contact information. His defenses felt protective rather than patronizing. The Alinea proposal was perfectly orchestrated, custom menu featuring dishes from each previous date, requiring weeks of planning and considerable expense. The great-grandmother's ring fit perfectly. He'd somehow determined my size without my knowledge, another impressive detail rather than suspicious surveillance. Later, I discovered Derek had enlisted Stephanie to befriend Zara, who innocently provided not only ring size, but detailed information about preferences, insecurities, and professional schedule. Every moment I'd interpreted as natural compatibility had been informed by strategic intelligence gathering. But in that moment, surrounded by soft lighting and celebrated cuisine, I felt nothing but gratitude. I had no idea the entire courtship was a carefully orchestrated campaign with multiple sources providing ammunition for capturing exactly the kind of woman who would be useful to the Morrison family's social and professional objectives. The ring was beautiful, the proposal romantic, and my acceptance enthusiastic. The only thing missing was authenticity. The warning signs were beautifully packaged in social refinement, making them easy to dismiss as cultural differences rather than fundamental incompatibilities. The engagement party at the Union League Club should have been my first major clue. "We must be mindful of the venue's atmosphere," Vivian explained when I suggested including my friends and family. "We wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place." The guest list included 47 Morrison associates and exactly 12 from my life, carefully vetted for their ability to blend in. My college roommate Sarah, a public school teacher, didn't make the cut. Neither did my cousin Marcus, a talented chef with visible tattoos. Derek played diplomatic mediator. "Maybe we could do something casual later, just for your friends. Think of this as business necessity rather than personal celebration." The party itself was masterclass in subtle humiliation disguised as warm welcome. Vivian introduced me with variations of the same script. "This is Maya, Derek's fiancée. She's done such beautiful work for our events, almost professional quality." When Robert Henderson asked about my business, Derek answered before I could speak. "Maya's built quite a little empire in food styling, incredibly talented at making everything picture perfect." The diminutive little empire made my 6-figure business sound like a hobby. The most telling moment came when Patricia Morrison Wells cornered me near desserts. "Vivian was quite concerned when Derek first mentioned you. Not because of your background, we're not snobs, but mixed marriages can be challenging when everyone has the best intentions." "Mixed marriages?" I asked, confused. "Different social backgrounds, different expectations. Sometimes these unions work when the woman is willing to adapt to family culture." Derek's response when I mentioned this: "Aunt Patricia means well, but she's from a different generation." He never contradicted her assumptions, just suggested they were old-fashioned rather than wrong. Wedding planning became negotiations, where my preferences were opening bids rather than actual desires. I wanted smaller ceremony, Vivian needed essential business connections. I hoped for menu reflecting both backgrounds. Harold insisted on traditional options that wouldn't challenge palates. Each compromise flowed in one direction. When I suggested my mother's famous apple pie alongside professional desserts, Vivian agreed but insisted it be served from kitchen rather than displayed. "We don't want it to look homemade next to professional pieces." The most significant red flag emerged during future living arrangements discussion. Derek assumed we'd move to Morrison Family Compound in Lake Forest. When I expressed interest in city independence, pushback was immediate. Family proximity is important for child rearing, Vivian protested. You'll want support when you start having babies. Children were inevitable, Morrison involvement non-negotiable. We don't have to decide immediately, Derek assured me, but you have to admit, built-in babysitters would make life easier when we're ready for kids. He said when, not if, mirroring family assumptions. Every major decision was predetermined based on Morrison traditions. The most chilling preview came during casual dinner 6 weeks before wedding. I arrived from client meeting in business attire. Vivian frowned at my blazer and pencil skirt. You look so corporate tonight. I hope married life gives you time for softer pursuits. Derek needs a wife who creates warm home environment, not someone always rushing to business meetings. Derek's response was brutally honest. Don't worry, Mother. Maya knows her priorities will shift after the wedding. The certainty in his voice should have sent me running. Instead, I convinced myself he was managing his mother's anxiety, that our private conversations represented his true feelings. I was so focused on earning acceptance that I failed to question whether their acceptance was worth having. Despite every warning sign, I walked down the aisle of Fourth Presbyterian Church on a crisp October morning, convinced marriage would resolve the tensions that had plagued our engagement. The wedding became a perfect metaphor for our relationship, beautiful on the surface, meticulously planned for social impact, completely lacking genuine intimacy. The Gothic Revival Church was Morrison family territory. Vivian had belonged 40 years, served on committees. Harold's father married there in 1952. The family plot in Graceland Cemetery was filled with Fourth Presbyterian parishioners going back generations. Other venues were never options. It's meaningful tradition, Derek explained when I suggested alternatives. Some things are bigger than personal preference. This connects our marriage to something larger than ourselves. What he meant, our marriage needed to fit seamlessly into Morrison narrative rather than beginning a new chapter that might challenge existing power structures. 473 people attended. 62 were connected to my life. The asymmetry was so pronounced that guests commented how intimate my side looked compared to the packed Morrison contingent. My mother sat second row, not first, because Vivian insisted on balanced immediate family, and Derek had 3 siblings, plus cousins requiring front row accommodation. The Drake Hotel reception had been planned with military precision, every detail approved by Vivian and executed by vendors who'd worked Morrison events for decades. My input was solicited, then systematically modified until the result bore little resemblance to my vision. Even my wedding dress became conflict. I'd loved a contemporary design by an emerging Chicago designer, clean lines, modern sophistication. Vivian's response, lovely for cocktail party, but for church wedding, don't you think something more traditional would be appropriate? The dress I wore was Vivian's choice. Elaborate ball gown with intricate beadwork and cathedral train requiring 3 attendants. Undeniably stunning and photogenic, but wearing it felt like performing a role rather than expressing personal style. The most revealing moment came during our first dance, To the Way You Look Tonight. Vivian's suggestion because it was timeless and sophisticated. Derek whispered, "You did it, Maya. You're officially a Morrison now." His words should have felt celebratory, but something in his tone suggested completion rather than beginning, as if the wedding marked successful conclusion of a project rather than start of partnership. The honeymoon in Tuscany should have been our opportunity to begin marriage as equals. Instead, Derek viewed our wedding night as when certain conversations could finally happen openly. Now that we're married, he said over breakfast in Florence, we should talk about timeline expectations. Mother has been asking about grandchildren, and I know she's hoping we won't wait too long. His confusion when I pointed out we'd never discussed children felt authentic, which made it more troubling. Derek genuinely couldn't understand why I might want consultation about decisions affecting my body, career, and future. The honeymoon conversations revealed Derek's assumptions that marriage would automatically align my priorities with family expectations. He expected gradual business transition toward part-time so I could focus on family responsibilities. He assumed we'd move to Lake Forest within 5 years. He'd discussed with his father my helping with Morrison's social obligations, unpaid event coordination. You're so talented at this stuff. Why wouldn't you want to use your skills to benefit the family? By our first anniversary, I understood I hadn't married Derek Morrison so much as been recruited into the Morrison family enterprise. My role, provide professional services, produce accomplished grandchildren, serve as evidence of Derek's taste and modern sensibilities. It was business arrangement disguised as love story, and I'd been too infatuated with packaging to read the fine print. The first 2 years established the pattern that would define our relationship: systematic undermining disguised as family tradition, professional dismissal wrapped in affectionate concern, gradual erosion of my identity under the guise of loving integration into the Morrison clan. The transition was so subtle I didn't recognize it until I'd lost significant ground. Small scheduling conflicts always resolved in favor of Morrison obligations. My business required weekend work, but Derek's family had standing commitments that apparently took precedence. "Surely you can delegate more to your team," Vivian would say when I missed family gatherings for client events. Successful entrepreneurs learn to work through others rather than doing everything themselves. Derek supported his mother with economic logic. If you're really as successful as your client list suggests, you should be able to hire people capable of managing events without direct supervision. At some point, decide whether you're building a business or buying yourself an expensive job. The criticism stung because it contained truth. I was controlling about events, reluctant to delegate, but my hands-on approach distinguished my services from larger firms, treating events like assembly lines. My clients paid premium because they knew I'd personally ensure every detail met expectations. The pressure intensified when Vivian enlisted my services for family events without compensation. Small favors, recommend a florist, suggest menu options, gradually expanded into expectations I'd personally coordinate entire events as my contribution to family harmony. "You're so gifted at this work," Vivian would say. "It would mean so much to have your personal touch on Carter's wedding reception. We'll handle expenses. We just need your expertise." Gift was carefully chosen. By framing professional skills as natural talent rather than acquired expertise, Vivian could request services without acknowledging commercial value. Derek encouraged this exploitation. "This could be good for your business long-term. Think about connections you're making, potential referrals." But referrals never materialized. The Morrison social circle viewed my event planning as charming family service rather than professional capability they might hire. When I provided excellent work for Morrison events, I was fulfilling my role as Derek's talented wife. The most insidious aspect was how this positioned my professional success as selfish or family unfriendly. When I turned down coordination requests for paying client commitments, I wasn't making sound business decisions, I was choosing money over family. Derek's career flourished with substantial family support. When Morrison and Associates landed a major contract, Harold ensured Derek received credit and promotion. When Derek expressed interest in sustainable investing, the network provided introductions and seed funding. My business was viewed as hobby that had gotten out of hand, tolerated as long as it didn't interfere with family obligations, but not deserving similar support. The double standard became impossible to ignore during our second Christmas. Derek volunteered me to coordinate the entire family gathering without consulting me first, requiring 3 weeks of planning during my busiest season. "Maya, this isn't about business. This is about family. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for people you love." But sacrifices only flowed one direction. Derek never missed family gatherings for my benefit, never declined Morrison requests to support my obligations, never positioned his career as secondary to relationship dynamics. The Christmas party planning became a breaking point. I spent 60 hours coordinating their flawless celebration. Vivian's thank you speech, "We're so lucky to have Maya in our family. Such natural talent for making everything beautiful. Wonderful when someone's gifts can benefit the whole family." Natural talent. Gifts benefiting family. Not professional expertise deserving recognition, but inherent abilities I was expected to share freely as evidence of family loyalty. That night, I realized the Morrison family had successfully transformed me from independent professional into unpaid service provider, accomplished so gradually with such emotional manipulation that I'd barely noticed. It would take 2 more years to fully understand that love and family harmony, in Morrison vocabulary, meant my complete subordination to their collective needs and priorities. By our 4th year of marriage, the Morrison family's systematic undermining had evolved from subtle manipulation to open dismissal of my professional competence. What had once been disguised as helpful suggestions now manifested as direct contradictions of my expertise, often in front of clients and colleagues who had previously respected my judgment. The most devastating incident occurred during the planning of the Chicago Arts Foundation's annual gala, a prestigious event that typically attracted 500 of the city's most influential philanthropists. I had worked with the foundation for 3 years, specifically requested because of my track record with similar high-stakes gatherings. The event represented exactly the kind of career-defining opportunity that had built my reputation. Derek's involvement began when he mentioned his father Harold served on the foundation's board. "You should coordinate with Derek on some planning," Vivian suggested during family dinner. "He knows the foundation's history and major donor preferences." What I didn't anticipate was Derek's assumption that his family connection gave him authority over creative and logistical decisions clearly within my professional purview. The collaboration I expected quickly became a power struggle where Derek positioned himself as the client's true representative while I was reduced to executing his vision. The conflict came to a head during a planning meeting with the foundation's event committee. I had prepared a comprehensive proposal for the evening's flow: cocktail reception, encouraging donor networking, dinner program maximizing fundraising impact, auction sequence strategically positioned to capitalize on emotional momentum. Derek attended as a family representative, though he had no official role and no professional event planning experience. When I presented my timeline, he interrupted before I'd finished. "Actually, I think we need to reconsider this approach," he said, addressing committee members rather than me. "The cocktail hour feels too long, and I'm not sure this auction placement will work for our donor demographic. Maya, perhaps we could discuss some modifications." Derek's tone and approach undermined my authority in front of people who had specifically hired me for my expertise. By positioning himself as decision maker and me as service provider needing guidance, he fundamentally altered the professional dynamic. Margaret Thornton, the foundation's development director, looked between Derek and me with obvious confusion. "I thought Maya was leading this planning process. We hired her specifically because of her experience with events of this magnitude." Derek's response revealed how completely he'd internalized his family's perspective on my career. "Of course Maya is tremendously talented, but sometimes fresh eyes can identify potential issues. I've attended dozens of foundation events over the years, so I have a good sense of what works with our particular audience." What followed was 45 minutes of Derek essentially redesigning the event while I took notes. Committee members gradually shifted attention from me to Derek, treating him as primary planner and me as his assistant. My carefully crafted proposal was replaced by Derek's vision, my role reduced from creative director to logistics coordinator. The pattern repeated with increasing frequency. Derek began inserting himself into conversations with my clients, offering unsolicited opinions about event strategies and positioning himself as co-planner rather than supportive spouse. His interventions were framed as helpful collaboration, but consistently undermined my authority and reduced my professional standing. The most damaging aspect was his family's enthusiastic support for his new interest. Vivian praised his natural instincts for hospitality. Harold suggested Derek might make event planning a formal part of his professional portfolio at Morrison & Associates. "Derek has such an eye for these things," Stephanie gushed during family dinner. "Maya is so lucky to have a partner who really understands her work and can contribute meaningfully to her projects." The situation reached crisis point when Derek suggested formalizing our collaboration by restructuring my business as a partnership. "Think about it, Maya. Artisan table styling could become Morrison Events, and we could really expand our services. With my business connections and your creative talents, we could dominate the high-end market." The proposal sounded like professional growth, but I recognized it as the final step in systematic takeover of my career. Derek wanted to transform my independent business into a Morrison family enterprise, with himself as business development lead and me as creative implementer. When I hesitated, Derek's response revealed how completely he'd adopted his family's perspective on appropriate gender roles. "I don't understand your reluctance. This would give you the security and support you've been working so hard to achieve on your own. Why would you want to struggle with business development and client management when I could handle those aspects and let you focus on the creative work you actually enjoy?" His assumption that I would prefer reduced responsibility and professional autonomy showed how fundamentally Derek misunderstood both my motivations and capabilities. He saw me as a talented woman who'd gotten in over her head and needed masculine guidance to reach full potential. That night, I stared at the ceiling wondering how I'd allowed my marriage to become systematic dismantling of everything I'd worked to build professionally. The woman who had once commanded respect from Chicago's most demanding clients was being gradually reduced to a supporting role in her own career. The invitation to plan Vivian's Thanksgiving celebration should have been routine by the 4th year of my marriage. I had coordinated 3 previous Morrison family Thanksgivings, each growing more elaborate as my professional skills were enlisted to create increasingly impressive gatherings. What I didn't realize was that this year's celebration was designed to be my final performance as a Morrison family member. The planning began in early October when Vivian called my office directly instead of discussing the event during usual family dinner conversation. Her formal approach should have been my first warning that something fundamental had shifted in how she viewed my role in the family. "Maya, dear, I need to discuss this year's Thanksgiving arrangements," she said, in the crisp tone she reserved for service providers. "Harold and I have been talking, and we think it's time to make this celebration truly special, something that reflects the Morrison family's position in the community." The emphasis on Morrison family position was deliberate and pointed. After 4 years of marriage, I was being reminded that my inclusion in their celebrations was contingent rather than automatic, dependent on continued usefulness rather than my status as Derek's wife. Vivian's vision was more ambitious than previous years. She wanted to host 22 family members for formal dinner, showcasing what she called traditional American elegance with sophisticated touches. The guest list included several relatives who hadn't attended previous celebrations, cousins from Boston, Derek's great-aunt from Philadelphia, and family friends being elevated to honorary family status. "I want this to be the kind of Thanksgiving people remember," Vivian explained during our first planning meeting at Millbrook Manor. "Something that establishes the standard for how these celebrations should be conducted. You understand the importance of making the right impression, don't you, Maya?" The question felt loaded with implications I couldn't identify. Vivian's emphasis on right impression and establishing standards suggested this dinner was designed to communicate something specific to extended family and guests. I threw myself into creating the perfect celebration, treating it as an opportunity to demonstrate how my professional expertise could elevate traditional family gatherings. I researched historical Thanksgiving menus, designed color palettes evoking autumn elegance, coordinated with Rose's catering company to ensure flawless execution. The menu development revealed first signs this celebration differed from previous Morrison events. Normally, Vivian solicited input about family preferences and dietary requirements. This year, she dismissed my suggestions to accommodate Derek's cousin Madison's vegetarian diet and Tyler's gluten sensitivity. "This is a traditional celebration, Maya," she said firmly. "People can adapt to the menu rather than expecting accommodation. I want everything to reflect classic American Thanksgiving traditions without modern complications." The logistical challenges were more complex than usual because Vivian had specific requirements about timing and presentation that seemed designed to create maximum stress. She wanted the meal served at precisely 4 o'clock, coordinating multiple courses in a kitchen not designed for commercial-level preparation. She insisted on formal service with multiple courses requiring different china and glassware managed by temporary staff unfamiliar with household systems. Most unusually, Vivian requested that I personally supervise every aspect rather than delegating to Rosa's experience team. This needs your personal touch, Maya. I want to ensure every detail reflects your standards and expertise. The request felt like a compliment, but meant I'd be working rather than celebrating, managing logistics while everyone else enjoyed the gathering I'd orchestrated. When I mentioned this to Derek, his response revealed how completely he'd internalized his family's perspective. "But you love this work," he said dismissively, "and it's not like you'll be missing conversation with people you don't know well anyway. This way, you can make sure everything goes perfectly." The financial arrangements were handled differently than previous years. Instead of the Morrison family covering expenses directly, Vivian asked me to coordinate payments through my business account, with understanding Derek would reimburse costs after the event. The arrangement seemed practical, but meant I was personally guaranteeing thousands in expenses for an event benefiting Morrison family social objectives. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, while reviewing guest lists to finalize place cards, I noticed several attendees weren't actually Morrison family members, but business associates and social connections, being introduced as family friends despite minimal previous interaction with Derek's relatives. The inclusion of semi-strangers in supposed intimate family gathering suggested this Thanksgiving was functioning as social showcase rather than personal celebration. Vivian was using my professional services to create impressive entertainment demonstrating Morrison family cultural sophistication to carefully selected audience. When I asked Derek about expanded guest list, his explanation confirmed suspicions about the event's true purpose. "Mother thought it would be nice to include people important to our family's business and social relationships. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, right? This is our way of showing appreciation to the extended community that supports us." But I was already committed to creating the perfect celebration, my professional reputation tied to the event's success regardless of underlying motivations. I continued planning with meticulous attention, determined to deliver an experience meeting Vivian's standards while showcasing the sophisticated hospitality I'd become known for. I had no idea that while I was orchestrating the perfect Morrison family Thanksgiving, Derek and his family were orchestrating the perfect end to my marriage. The celebration I was planning with such care was designed to be my farewell performance as a Morrison wife, and my exclusion from the dinner table was only the opening act of a much larger humiliation they had spent months planning. The betrayal revealed itself through Derek's carelessness with his phone, though I suspect now that his slip was intentional, a calculated way to let me discover what I was never meant to confront directly. It was Tuesday morning, 3 days before Thanksgiving, and I was reviewing final vendor confirmations while Derek showered. His phone, charging beside my coffee cup, buzzed with an incoming text. The preview screen showed a message from Celeste Richmond. "Can't wait for Thursday. Has she figured it out yet, or are we still pretending this is a surprise?" Celeste Richmond. Derek's college girlfriend, the woman Vivian had always adored, the person everyone expected him to marry before he met me. According to family lore, Celeste had broken Derek's heart by relocating to London for an international law firm position. Their relationship had ended amicably, but sadly, a victim of career timing rather than incompatible feelings. Her text suggested not only current contact, but active involvement in whatever Thursday's surprise was supposed to be. My fingers moved without conscious decision, opening Derek's message thread with Celeste. What I found there rewrote everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my husband's fidelity, and the Morrison family's Thanksgiving planning. The messages went back 8 months, beginning shortly after Derek had suggested restructuring my business as Morrison Events. Early conversations were carefully neutral, professional updates, shared memories, casual check-ins that could have been interpreted as innocent reconnection. But the tone shifted dramatically around when I had declined Derek's partnership proposal. "Maya is being stubborn about the business restructuring," Derek had written in June. "Mother thinks it's time to accelerate our timeline." Celeste's response was supportive but strategic. "Be patient with her. The transition needs to look natural, not forced. We can't afford to have her suspicious before everything is in place." The subsequent messages revealed a conspiracy extending far beyond simple marital infidelity. Derek and Celeste had been planning not just to reunite romantically, but to systematically dismantle my professional reputation and financial security before announcing their relationship publicly. "The Thanksgiving dinner will be perfect," Derek had written 2 weeks earlier. "By Friday morning, she'll understand that her place in this family was always temporary. Once she's publicly excluded and professionally compromised, the divorce will be positioned as inevitable rather than cruel." Celeste's response chilled me. "Your mother's idea about the catering payments was brilliant. By the time Maya realizes she's personally liable for all those expenses with no reimbursement coming, she'll be desperate enough to accept whatever settlement terms you offer just to avoid bankruptcy." I screenshot every message, hands trembling as the full scope of their plan became clear. The elaborate Thanksgiving celebration wasn't designed to showcase Morrison family sophistication. It was designed to destroy me financially and socially while providing Derek with perfect cover story for ending our marriage. The financial trap was particularly ingenious. By having me coordinate all vendor payments through my business account, Derek had ensured I would be personally liable for nearly $15,000 in expenses. When the Morrison family inevitably refused reimbursement after excluding me from their celebration, my business would absorb devastating financial blow during crucial holiday season when most annual revenue was generated. But financial damage was only part of their strategy. The guest list I'd been helping refine included several of Chicago's most influential social figures, people whose opinion of my professional competence could make or break my reputation. By excluding me from a celebration I'd publicly been planning for months, Derek and his family would send a clear message about my standing in their social circle. The messages revealed Celeste had been actively involved in planning every detail of my humiliation. She had suggested ways to maximize public impact of my exclusion, recommended influential guests whose attendance would amplify social significance of my absence, and helped craft narrative Derek would use to explain our divorce. The story needs to be that Maya became increasingly demanding and difficult, that she was never really suited for Morrison family lifestyle, and the marriage deteriorated naturally over irreconcilable differences. Derek's responses showed enthusiastic embrace of character assassination. Everyone has already seen how she prioritizes business over family obligations. It won't be hard to convince people she chose professional ambition over family harmony. The most devastating discovery was how long Derek had been documenting my behavior to support their future divorce narrative. Screenshots of my text messages declining family events due to client commitments, photos of me working during family gatherings, records of conversations where I'd expressed frustration about Morrison family expectations. Every moment I'd interpreted as normal professional boundary setting had been cataloged as evidence of my unsuitability as a Morrison wife. The messages also revealed that Celeste's return from London had been planned specifically to coincide with my removal from Derek's life. Her law firm had offered her a Chicago partnership, but she'd delayed accepting until Derek could resolve his Maya situation. "I'll be back permanently in January," Celeste had written. "By then, Maya will be out of the picture and we can announce our engagement without anyone questioning the timeline." I forwarded all screenshots to my personal email, then carefully deleted evidence of my access. Derek emerged from the shower 15 minutes later to find me calmly reviewing catering timelines.
"How are final preparations coming?" he asked, kissing my head in a gesture that now seemed like performance for his own conscience. "Everything is perfectly on schedule," I replied, voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "Your family is going to have exactly the Thanksgiving celebration they've been planning for." Derek smiled, satisfied his deception remained intact. He had no idea I now understood the true purpose of the elaborate dinner I'd spent weeks orchestrating. The Morrison family wanted to use my professional expertise to create perfect stage for my public humiliation, then leave me financially devastated and professionally ruined. Instead, their conspiracy had given me something I hadn't possessed since building my business: perfect clarity about my enemies and their methods. Derek and his family had spent months planning the perfect way to destroy me. Now I had 3 days to plan something they would never see coming.
Rosa's restaurant supply warehouse in Pilsen provided the perfect backdrop for serious conversations about the hospitality business's darker side. We met there at 3 o'clock, surrounded by stainless steel equipment and wine cases that would grace Chicago's most exclusive tables over the holiday weekend. "Show me everything," Rosa said simply, after I explained the basic situation. She poured 2 glasses of Cabernet from her office emergency bottle and settled in to review the screenshots I'd forwarded to my secure email. Rosa Delacroix had been in Chicago catering for 15 years, long enough to see every variety of family dysfunction, financial manipulation, and social cruelty accompanying high-end entertaining. Her client base included the city's most demanding personalities, and she developed both professional skills and personal philosophy necessary to navigate their complex motivations and hidden agendas. "This is sophisticated," she said, after reviewing Derek's messages with Celeste. "They've been planning this for months, and they understand exactly how to use your professional reputation against you. The timing is particularly cruel. Destroying your business during peak season won't give you time to recover before the industry moves on." The financial trap was more devastating than I'd initially realized. Rosa walked me through cash flow implications of absorbing $15,000 in unreimbursed expenses during the same month my business typically collected payment for November and December events. The combination of unexpected costs and delayed client payments could create liquidity crisis, forcing me to choose between paying vendors promptly or meeting payroll. "But they've made one crucial error," Rosa continued, pulling out contracts and correspondence. "They assumed you were working alone, and they forgot that I have as much invested in protecting our professional relationship as you do." Rosa's involvement extended far beyond simple catering services. She had coordinated with rental companies, florists, service staff, and specialty vendors to create Vivian's elaborate celebration. Each relationship represented years of mutual trust, and Rosa had authority to make changes that could completely alter the gathering's character. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, sensing her thinking's direction. "We give them exactly what they've ordered," Rosa said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A traditional Thanksgiving celebration that reflects their true family values and demonstrates their authentic commitment to gratitude and hospitality." The plan Rosa outlined was elegant in simplicity and devastating in potential impact. Instead of obvious sabotage that could be traced back to us, we would execute their celebration flawlessly while making subtle modifications, revealing their character to the carefully selected audience of influential guests. The menu modifications were our strategy's centerpiece. Rosa suggested replacing sophisticated dishes I'd planned with aggressively traditional options, challenging Morrison family pretensions to culinary sophistication. Instead of herb-crusted turkey with cognac gravy, we'd serve standard supermarket bird with packet gravy. Truffle mac and cheese would become boxed Kraft dinner in elegant serving dishes. Artisanal rolls would be replaced with Wonder Bread. Curated wine selection with $2 Chuck in expensive decanters. "The guests will notice immediately," Rosa explained, "but they won't be able to complain without seeming ungrateful or pretentious. Meanwhile, the Morrison family will be forced to serve food reflecting their actual values rather than aspirational ones." The plan Rosa outlined was elegant in simplicity and devastating in potential impact. Instead of obvious sabotage that could be traced back to us, we would execute their celebration flawlessly while making subtle modifications, revealing their character to the carefully selected audience of influential guests. The menu modifications were our strategy's centerpiece. Rosa suggested replacing sophisticated dishes I'd planned with aggressively traditional options, challenging Morrison family pretensions to culinary sophistication. Instead of herb-crusted turkey with cognac gravy, we'd serve standard supermarket bird with packet gravy. Truffle mac and cheese would become boxed Kraft dinner in elegant serving dishes. Artisanal rolls would be replaced with Wonder Bread. Curated wine selection with $2 Chuck in expensive decanters. "The guests will notice immediately," Rosa explained, "but they won't be able to complain without seeming ungrateful or pretentious. Meanwhile, the Morrison family will be forced to serve food reflecting their actual values rather than aspirational ones." The plan Rosa outlined was elegant in simplicity and devastating in potential impact. Service modifications were equally subtle but symbolically powerful. Instead of professional waitstaff I'd arranged, Rosa would provide servers briefed on the Morrison family's true attitude toward service workers: polite but not deferential, efficient but not invisible, treating the gathering like community potluck rather than exclusive social event. The party favor was masterpiece of passive-aggressive hospitality, custom-printed recipe cards for traditional Morrison family Thanksgiving, featuring instructions for preparing simple, processed foods comprising their meal. Each card would include a personal note: "Thank you for sharing our family's authentic traditions. We hope you'll recreate these simple, heartfelt dishes in your own homes." Our most powerful tool was documentation. Rosa had connections with food photographers specializing in editorial work for Chicago Magazine. By arranging professional photography, we could ensure their Thanksgiving would be preserved in high-resolution detail, processed food elegantly presented, family reactions captured candidly, guests' expressions recorded for posterity. "Social media posts from influential attendees will speak for themselves," Rosa noted. "We won't need to say anything negative. The photos will tell the story of what kind of hosts they really are." The most crucial element was maintaining complete deniability. Every modification would be technically within bounds of what the Morrison family had requested. They had asked for traditional American Thanksgiving. We were simply interpreting instructions more literally than expected. "If anyone questions our choices," Rosa explained, "we'll have documentation showing we followed client specifications precisely. Vivian Morrison specifically requested traditional options without modern complications. That's exactly what she'll receive." The logistics required precise timing and coordination. Rosa's team would prepare both sets of food: sophisticated menu I'd originally planned and aggressively traditional alternatives. The switch would happen during transport to Millbrook Manor, ensuring I could maintain plausible ignorance while Rosa took responsibility for following revised instructions. "But Maya," Rosa said, expression becoming serious, "once we execute this plan, there's no undoing it. The Morrison family will know immediately that you discovered their conspiracy, and they'll escalate attempts to destroy you. Are you prepared for that kind of war?" I thought about Derek's assumption that discovering his betrayal would leave me devastated and desperate. I thought about Vivian's decades of subtle humiliation. I thought about 4 years of systematic professional undermining wrapped in concern for my well-being. "Rosa, they've already declared war on me. They've spent months planning to destroy everything I've built. The only question is whether I'm going to fight back or let them execute their plan unopposed." Rosa nodded slowly, understanding our decision's implications. "Then we'd better make sure their Thanksgiving is exactly as memorable as they intended." We spent 2 hours refining every detail, ensuring Thursday's celebration would reflect the Morrison family's authentic values while demonstrating the consequences of underestimating someone whose professional expertise included understanding hospitality psychology and social gathering power dynamics. They wanted traditional family Thanksgiving, establishing standards for how celebrations should be conducted. They were going to receive exactly that: a gathering so authentically traditional, it would become the standard by which their future social credibility would be measured. Wednesday evening arrived with unseasonably warm weather for late November, as if even nature was conspiring to make the Morrison family's Thanksgiving celebration memorable for all the wrong reasons. I spent the day maintaining my facade as the devoted daughter-in-law, confirming final details with vendors while secretly coordinating with Rosa to ensure our modified celebration would proceed flawlessly. Derek returned home that evening in unusually high spirits, whistling as he sorted through mail and poured himself a scotch. His good mood felt obscene given what I now knew about his intentions, but I maintained my performance as the busy wife focused on last-minute event coordination. "Everything on track for tomorrow's feast?" he asked, settling into his leather armchair with the satisfaction of a man whose carefully laid plans were proceeding exactly as intended. "Absolutely," I replied, reviewing my tablet with the same meticulous attention to detail that had built my professional reputation. "Your mother is going to have exactly the traditional celebration she's been dreaming of." Derek's smile widened at my response, apparently interpreting my words as confirmation that I remained oblivious to their conspiracy. In reality, every word was carefully chosen to reflect the devastating surprise his family would receive in less than 24 hours. The evening's most surreal moment came when Derek's phone buzzed with a text message from Celeste that he didn't bother to hide from me. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," the preview screen read. "This is going to be perfect." Derek glanced at the message, then at me, apparently testing whether I would react to evidence of his continued communication with another woman. When I showed no signs of recognition or concern, he seemed satisfied that his deception remained intact. "Just some work colleagues confirming attendance at tomorrow's dinner," he said casually. "You know how Mother likes to include business associates in family celebrations." The lie was delivered with such practiced ease that I wondered how many other deceptions I had unknowingly accepted over the years of our marriage. But instead of confronting his dishonesty, I simply nodded and returned to my planning documents. "I should probably get to bed early," I said, gathering my materials. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day of coordination and supervision." Derek's expression shifted slightly at my mention of supervision. "Actually, Maya, I was thinking you might want to take a more relaxed approach tomorrow. Let the catering staff handle the details so you can actually enjoy the celebration with the family." His suggestion was clearly designed to remove me from direct oversight of the event execution, probably to prevent me from discovering any last-minute changes they had planned to ensure my exclusion felt natural rather than orchestrated. The concern for my enjoyment was touching, considering they had no intention of including me in the actual celebration. "That's sweet of you," I replied, "but you know how I am about these things. I won't be able to relax until I'm sure everything is perfect. Besides, this event is too important to your mother for me to risk any details being overlooked." Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at my insistence on maintaining control over the logistics. He had clearly hoped I would voluntarily step back from supervision, making their planned modifications easier to implement without my knowledge. "Well, just try not to get so caught up in the work that you miss the actual celebration," he said with forced lightness. "The whole point is spending time together as a family." The irony of his statement, his concern that I not miss a celebration I would be systematically excluded from, almost broke my composure. But I maintained my role as the devoted wife who trusted her husband's genuine interest in her well-being. That night, lying in bed next to Derek while he scrolled through his phone with the casual confidence of someone whose betrayal remained undetected, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. For months, I had struggled with feeling unwelcome in the Morrison family, despite my efforts to contribute meaningfully to their gatherings. Tomorrow, I would finally understand why my attempts at belonging had always felt futile, because my exclusion had been the plan all along. But their plan depended on my devastation, my financial desperation, my social humiliation, leaving me willing to accept whatever terms they offered to escape further damage. They had spent so much time crafting the perfect trap that they had failed to consider what might happen if their victim refused to be trapped. Derek's phone buzzed with another message, and I caught a glimpse of Vivian's name on the screen. "Everything confirmed for tomorrow's surprise," the preview read. "She has no idea what's coming." Derek typed back quickly, "Perfect. By Friday, this will all be behind us." I closed my eyes and smiled in the darkness. They were absolutely right. By Friday, this would all be behind us. The Morrison family's systematic humiliation campaign would be finished, Derek's months of careful planning would reach their conclusion, and I would be free of the exhausting effort to earn acceptance from people who had never intended to offer it. The only surprise would be discovering who was actually trapped when the celebration they had orchestrated so carefully revealed their true character to everyone who mattered in Chicago's social hierarchy. Thursday morning would bring the Morrison family exactly the traditional Thanksgiving they had been planning for months. Rosa and I had simply ensured that their celebration would be more authentic than they had ever imagined possible. Thursday morning dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of golden autumn light that made Millbrook Manor look like something from a magazine spread about American family traditions. I arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, 3 hours before the guests were scheduled to arrive, ostensibly to oversee final preparations and coordinate with the catering staff. Derek had left early for what he claimed was a brief morning meeting with his father about business matters that needed to be resolved before the family gathering. In reality, I suspected he was finalizing last-minute details of their conspiracy, ensuring that every element of my planned humiliation would proceed smoothly. Vivian greeted me at the front door with unusual warmth, her smile bright with anticipation for the day's events. "Maya, dear, you look lovely. I hope you're not planning to spend the entire day working in the kitchen. This is a celebration after all." Her concern for my enjoyment felt particularly ironic, given that she had no intention of including me in the actual celebration. But I played my role as the grateful daughter-in-law who appreciated her thoughtfulness. "I just want to make sure everything meets your standards," I replied. "This is such an important gathering for the family." Rosa's catering team arrived precisely on schedule, their professional efficiency masking the carefully orchestrated modifications they would implement over the next few hours. To any observer, they appeared to be executing exactly the sophisticated menu I had spent weeks planning with meticulous attention to detail. The floral arrangements were delivered and positioned throughout the house, elegant autumn displays that created the perfect backdrop for what would soon become the most memorable Thanksgiving in Morrison family history. The rental company arrived with additional china, crystal, and silver service pieces that would showcase the processed foods to come with inappropriate elegance. By 11 o'clock, the house buzzed with controlled activity as servers arranged place settings and bartenders prepared cocktail stations. Everything looked exactly as Vivian had envisioned, a gathering that would demonstrate the Morrison family's sophisticated approach to traditional celebrations. I spent the morning moving between the kitchen and dining areas, ostensibly supervising preparations, while actually ensuring that Rosa's team could execute our modified plan without interference. Every few minutes, I received text updates confirming that various elements of our strategy were proceeding as scheduled. "Wine decanters filled and positioned," came one message. "Custom recipe cards prepared and staged for distribution." Another update confirmed, "Photography team briefed and positioned discreetly around the property." The most crucial element was maintaining my performance as the dedicated event coordinator who remained focused on creating the perfect experience for the Morrison family and their guests. When Vivian checked on my progress, she found me reviewing timeline schedules and coordinating with service staff with the same professional intensity that had characterized all my previous work for her family. "You're so thorough, Maya," she commented during one of her kitchen visits. "I don't know how we managed family gatherings before you became part of the family." The comment was probably meant as a compliment, but it felt like a farewell, recognition of services that would soon be terminated along with my marriage to her son. In a few hours, Vivian would discover exactly how the Morrison family had managed gatherings before my involvement, because they were about to receive precisely the level of sophistication they had actually valued. Derek returned home at noon, his timing perfectly calculated to arrive after the majority of preparations were complete, but early enough to greet guests and oversee any final adjustments to their planned surprise. He found me in the dining room, making final adjustments to the place card arrangements that would soon reveal the evening's true purpose. "Everything looks incredible," he said, surveying the elegant table settings that would soon showcase food more appropriate for a church basement potluck than a sophisticated family celebration. His satisfaction was genuine. Derek truly believed that the evening would proceed exactly as he had planned, with me discovering my exclusion just in time to create maximum humiliation with minimum opportunity for effective response. The guests began arriving at 12:30, each greeted with champagne cocktails and the kind of gracious hospitality that the Morrison family was known for in Chicago's social circles. I watched from the kitchen as familiar faces from the city's cultural and business elite gathered in the living room, unaware that they were about to witness a very different kind of performance than they had been invited to attend. At 1 o'clock, Vivian made the announcement that would set the final act of her carefully orchestrated plan in motion. "Family and friends," she called out, gathering everyone's attention, "let's move to the dining room for our traditional Thanksgiving celebration." The procession toward the dining room felt like a funeral march, which in many ways it was. The death of my marriage, the end of my relationship with the Morrison family, and the conclusion of 4 years spent trying to earn acceptance from people who had never intended to offer it. As the guests took their assigned seats around the perfectly appointed table, I remained in the kitchen, ostensibly supervising the final plating of dishes that would soon reveal the Morrison family's authentic relationship to tradition, hospitality, and genuine gratitude. Rosa appeared at my elbow, her expression calm but alert. "Are you ready for this?" she asked quietly. I looked through the kitchen doorway at the gathering of influential Chicagoans who were about to discover what the Morrison family truly valued when they thought no one important was watching. In a few minutes, they would understand exactly what kind of hosts they had been invited to celebrate with. "I've been ready for this for 4 years," I replied. "Let's give them the traditional family Thanksgiving they've been planning for." Around the Morrison family's ancestral mahogany table, the autumn light streaming through tall windows illuminated the crystal and silver with magazine-worthy perfection, creating exactly the sophisticated atmosphere Vivian had envisioned for her carefully orchestrated celebration. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the tableau unfold with the detached fascination of an anthropologist observing a ritual whose true meaning was hidden from most of its participants. The guests represented Chicago's social elite, art museum board members, prominent attorneys, successful entrepreneurs, and influential philanthropists who had accepted invitations to what they believed would be an elegant family gathering. Derek moved around the table with practiced charm, ensuring everyone felt welcomed and valued. His performance as the gracious host was flawless, enhanced by the anticipation of the surprise he believed would soon unfold exactly as planned. Vivian presided from her position at the head of the table, her satisfaction barely contained as she prepared to witness what she expected would be my devastation and social humiliation. The seating arrangement was a masterpiece of calculated cruelty. Every chair was occupied by someone whose opinion mattered in Chicago's interconnected social and business networks. The empty space where my place setting should have been was positioned for maximum visibility, impossible to miss or explain away as an oversight. "I think we're all here," Vivian announced with theatrical warmth, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure everyone could hear. "What a blessing to gather together with the people who matter most." Margaret Thornton from the Arts Foundation looked around the table with polite confusion. "Vivian, dear, isn't Maya joining us? I was hoping to thank her personally for the beautiful work she's done coordinating this celebration." The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Several other guests began glancing around, clearly expecting to see the woman whose professional expertise had created the elegant gathering they were enjoying. Derek stepped forward with the casual confidence of someone delivering a carefully rehearsed line. "Oh, Maya had some last-minute business obligations to handle. You know how dedicated she is to her work. Sometimes it's hard to get her to step away from professional responsibilities, even for family celebrations." The explanation was perfectly crafted, plausible enough to avoid immediate challenge, while subtly positioning my absence as evidence of misplaced priorities. Several guests nodded with understanding, apparently accepting that a devoted professional might sacrifice family time for business demands. But Margaret Thornton's frown deepened. "That seems unusual, Derek. Maya specifically mentioned how much she was looking forward to celebrating with your extended family. Just yesterday, she was confirming final details and seemed quite excited about the gathering." The explanation was perfectly crafted, plausible enough to avoid immediate challenge, while subtly positioning my absence as evidence of misplaced priorities. Several guests nodded its understanding, apparently accepting that a devoted professional might sacrifice family time for business demands. But Margaret Thornton's frown deepened. "That seems unusual, Derek. Maya specifically mentioned how much she was looking forward to celebrating with your extended family. Just yesterday, she was confirming final details and seemed quite excited about the gathering." Her challenge to Derek's narrative created the first crack in their carefully constructed story. Other guests began exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from polite acceptance to genuine curiosity about the discrepancy between Derek's explanation and their own recent interactions with me. Robert Henderson, the Morrison family's longtime financial advisor, cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps Maya is simply ensuring that everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. I know from experience how much coordination these elegant gatherings require. His suggestion offered Derek an opportunity to modify his story without contradicting it entirely. But Derek had committed to his original explanation and seemed determined to maintain it despite growing skepticism from several guests. Maya does prefer working behind the scenes, Derek agreed, though his voice carried a slight edge that suggested frustration with the unexpected scrutiny. She finds that level of control more comfortable than simply relaxing and enjoying herself as a guest. Stephanie Morrison Blake jumped in to support her brother's narrative. Derek's right, Maya has always been most comfortable when she's managing details rather than participating socially. It's just her personality. The characterization of me as socially awkward rather than professionally dedicated was a subtle but important escalation. They weren't just explaining my absence, they were reshaping my identity in ways that would justify their treatment of me and provide context for the divorce story they planned to circulate. But their strategy was failing to convince the very audience it was designed to influence. Patricia Wells, one of Chicago's most prominent gallery owners, looked directly at the empty space where my chair should have been. "I'm confused," she said, with the directness that had made her successful in the art world. "If Maya is working behind the scenes, why isn't there a place setting for her? Surely she'll join us for the meal itself, even if she's been coordinating preparations." The question cut to the heart of their deception. There was no credible explanation for why a family member would be completely excluded from the dining arrangements, regardless of their role in event coordination. The missing place setting revealed the deliberate nature of my exclusion in ways that Derek's casual explanations couldn't disguise. Vivian's response demonstrated the calculating nature of their plan. Instead of addressing Patricia's question directly, she deflected attention toward the meal service. "Let's not worry about logistics right now," she said with forced lightness. "Maya knows she's always welcome at our family table. I'm sure she'll join us when she's ready." The deflection was expertly executed, but it failed to resolve the fundamental contradiction that Patricia had identified. Several guests continued looking toward the kitchen, clearly expecting me to appear and take my place at the table they assumed had been prepared for her. From my position in the doorway, I could see the growing discomfort rippling through the gathering. These were sophisticated people who understood social dynamics and recognized when something fundamental was wrong with the situation, even if they couldn't immediately identify the specific problem. Derek's jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly, the first sign that their carefully orchestrated humiliation wasn't proceeding exactly as planned. The questions from guests were supposed to provide opportunities for him to explain my absence in ways that positioned me as difficult or uncommitted to family harmony. Instead, their inquiries were highlighting the cruelty of excluding me from a celebration I had clearly been instrumental in creating. I stepped forward into the dining room, my movement immediately drawing every eye in the room. The conversation stopped as guests turned toward me with expressions of relief, curiosity, and anticipation. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "I just wanted to thank everyone for being here to celebrate with the Morrison family." The pause that followed felt eternal. 22 pairs of eyes looked between me and the table where no seat had been prepared for my inclusion. The contradiction between my obvious role as hostess and my systematic exclusion from their gathering was now impossible to ignore or explain away. Derek recovered first, his smile bright with desperation. "Maya, we were just telling everyone how hard you've been working to make the celebration special."
"That's very kind of you," I replied, my tone warm but steady. "I hope everyone enjoys discovering exactly how special this traditional Morrison family Thanksgiving is going to be." The first course arrived with ceremonial fanfare, servers presenting what appeared to be elegant appetizers arranged on the Morrison family's finest china. The guests settled into their seats with the comfortable anticipation of people accustomed to sophisticated dining, completely unprepared for what they were about to discover. Margaret Thornton lifted her fork to taste what looked like an artisanal cheese spread, only to pause with confusion. "This is interesting," she said diplomatically, examining the orange substance more closely. "Is this a deconstructed approach to traditional flavors?" Around the table, similar expressions of bewilderment appeared as guests encountered Velveeta cheese, whipped with mayonnaise, and served on Ritz crackers, presented with the same elegant garnishes I had originally planned for sophisticated hors d'oeuvres. The visual presentation was flawless, but the flavors were unmistakably those of processed convenience foods. Derek's face had begun to show the first signs of genuine alarm as he tasted his own appetizer. His eyes found mine across the room with an expression of growing comprehension that his carefully orchestrated plan was being derailed in ways he had never anticipated. "Maya," he called out, his voice carrying a warning edge, "perhaps you could check with the catering staff about the menu selections?" "Everything is exactly as ordered," I replied calmly. "Rose's team has followed the Morrison family specifications for traditional American Thanksgiving fare without modern complications or accommodations." Vivian's fork froze halfway to her mouth as the implications of my words began to register. She had indeed requested traditional options without sophisticated modifications, but she had never imagined that her instructions would be interpreted quite so literally. The main course arrived with even greater theatrical presentation. Servers carried silver platters bearing what appeared to be expertly prepared turkey with all the traditional accompaniments. But as carving began, it became clear that the golden brown bird was a standard supermarket turkey, and the elegant side dishes were equally basic preparations, elevated only by their refined presentation. Robert Henderson attempted to maintain conversational flow while processing what he was experiencing. "This is certainly authentic," he managed, cutting into stuffing that was clearly from a box mix despite being molded into an elegant terrine shape. "Vivian, dear," Patricia Wells said, with the directness that had made her a force in Chicago's art world, "I'm curious about the menu choices. This seems quite different from your usual entertaining style." The comment hung in the air like an accusation. Everyone at the table recognized that they were being served food more appropriate for a church basement potluck than an elegant family gathering, but social protocols prevented direct criticism of their hostess's hospitality choices. Vivian's response revealed the first cracks in her composed facade. "Maya coordinated all the catering arrangements," she said, her tone carrying unmistakable blame. "I trusted her judgment about what would be appropriate for our family celebration." The deflection was expertly calculated to position me as responsible for the disappointing meal while maintaining Vivian's reputation as a sophisticated hostess who had been let down by unreliable help. But her strategy backfired because several guests had heard our previous conversations about menu planning and knew that I had originally proposed much more elaborate options. "But Maya," Margaret Thornton said, turning towards me with genuine confusion, "when we discussed the Foundation Gala, you demonstrated such sophisticated culinary judgment. This seems so different from your usual style." Her observation created the opening I had been waiting for. "You're absolutely right, Margaret. This menu does represent a departure from my usual approach, but the Morrison family specifically requested traditional options that would reflect their authentic values rather than pretentious sophistication." The word authentic landed like a physical blow. Every guest at the table understood immediately that they were experiencing the Morrison family's actual relationship to hospitality and genuine appreciation for their guests. The processed food, despite its elegant presentation, revealed what the Morrison family truly valued when they thought no one important was watching. Derek stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Maya, I think we need to discuss this situation privately." His attempt to remove me from the room before I could do further damage to their reputation was transparently desperate. The guests watched our exchange with the fascination of people witnessing a domestic drama unfold in real time. "There's nothing to discuss privately, Derek," I replied, my voice carrying clearly through the silent dining room. "Your family asked for a traditional celebration that would establish standards for how such gatherings should be conducted. Everyone here is witnessing exactly what the Morrison family considers appropriate hospitality." The silence that followed was deafening.
22 influential Chicagoans sat frozen around a table laden with processed foods served on priceless china, finally understanding that they had been invited to witness something far more revealing than an elegant family celebration. Stephanie Morrison Blake made a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Maya, I think there's been some kind of miscommunication about the catering arrangements. This obviously isn't what Mother intended. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone to display the text message thread I had carefully preserved, I have documentation showing that your mother specifically requested traditional American Thanksgiving without modern complications. Rosa's team has delivered exactly what was ordered. The phone screen was too distant for guests to read specific messages, but my reference to documentation created immediate tension. Everyone understood that I was claiming to have evidence supporting my interpretation of events, which meant the blame Vivian had attempted to assign to me might not be entirely accurate. Rosa appeared in the dining room doorway with perfect timing, carrying a tray of what appeared to be sophisticated dessert presentations. "Is everyone enjoying the traditional Morrison family menu?" she asked with professional courtesy. "We have the custom recipe cards ready to distribute so your guests can recreate these authentic family dishes at home." The mention of recipe cards sent a visible shock through Vivian's composed facade. The idea that their influential guests would receive instructions for preparing Velveeta cheese spread and boxed stuffing as mementos of their Morrison family dining experience was too horrifying to contemplate. "That won't be necessary," Derek said quickly, but Rosa was already moving around the table, placing elegant cards beside each guest's plate. Margaret Thornton picked up her card and read aloud, "Traditional Morrison Family Thanksgiving. Velveeta cheese spread. Mix 1 pound processed cheese with half-cup mayonnaise. Serve on Ritz crackers with garnish of choice." The words fell into absolute silence, as every guest realized they were holding documentation of exactly what the Morrison family had served them, presented as treasured family traditions worthy of replication in their own homes. The silence stretched until Patricia Wells set down her recipe card with deliberate precision and fixed her gaze directly on me. "Maya, I think we all deserve an explanation for what's happening here." Her tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to cutting through social pretenses to reach uncomfortable truths. Around the table, 21 other influential Chicagoans waited for my response, their expressions ranging from confusion to growing comprehension that they were witnessing something far more complex than a catering mishap. Derek made one final attempt to regain control of the narrative. "Patricia, I apologize for any confusion. There seems to have been some miscommunication with the catering arrangements, and Maya is—" "Actually," I interrupted, my voice calm but carrying clearly through the room, "there's been no miscommunication at all. Your family received exactly the celebration you've been planning for." I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshot folder I had prepared. "Derek, would you like to explain to your guests about your text messages with Celeste Richmond discussing how this Thanksgiving dinner was designed to publicly exclude me while leaving me financially responsible for all the expenses?" The color drained from Derek's face as he realized I had discovered their conspiracy. Around the table, guests exchanged sharp glances as they began to understand they had witnessed the execution of a deliberately cruel plan rather than a simple family gathering. "Or perhaps," I continued, "Vivian would like to share her phone conversation with the restaurant about reducing the seating from 13 to 12 because, and I quote, his wife will not be staying for the dinner." Vivian's composure cracked completely. "Maya, you're being hysterical. No one is excluding you from anything." Margaret Thornton's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Then where is her chair, Vivian? If Maya isn't being excluded, why is there no place for her at this table she clearly planned and coordinated?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Every guest could see the deliberate nature of my exclusion, and Vivian's attempt to deny it only highlighted the calculated cruelty of their plan. "The truth is," I said, addressing the entire table, "the Morrison family invited you here to witness what they planned would be my public humiliation and social destruction. They expected me to discover my exclusion from this celebration and collapse in grateful desperation, accepting whatever divorce terms they offered to avoid further embarrassment." Robert Henderson leaned forward, his expression grim. "Are you saying this entire gathering was orchestrated as some kind of performance?" "Exactly," I replied. "Derek and his family spent months planning to destroy my business during peak season by leaving me personally liable for $15,000 in event expenses while simultaneously damaging my professional reputation by excluding me from a celebration I had publicly been coordinating." The financial details sent a visible shock through the assembled guests. These were sophisticated people who understood exactly how devastating such a strategy could be to a small business owner, particularly during the crucial holiday season. Stephanie Morrison Blake attempted damage control. "Maya, you're obviously upset, but you're misinterpreting." "Am I?" I pulled up Derek's text thread with Celeste Richmond and began reading aloud. Quote, "By Friday morning, she'll understand that her place in this family was always temporary. Once she's publicly excluded and professionally compromised, the divorce will be positioned as inevitable rather than cruel." The words landed like physical blows. Several guests audibly gasped as they realized they had been recruited as unwitting participants in a systematic campaign to destroy someone's life and livelihood. Margaret Thornton stood slowly, her face pale with disgust. "Derek Morrison, are you telling me that you invited us here under false pretenses to participate in deliberately humiliating your wife?" Derek's desperate attempt at denial crumpled under the weight of evidence I had presented. "It's more complicated than that, Margaret. Our marriage has been deteriorating for months, and—" "Stop," Patricia Wells commanded, her voice sharp with authority. "Just stop talking, Derek. Every word you say is making this worse." She turned to address me directly. "Maya, I owe you an apology. We all do. None of us should have been put in the position of witnessing this cruelty, and you should never have been subjected to it." Around the table, other guests began standing, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to outright anger at having been manipulated into participating in what they now understood was a deliberately orchestrated attack on someone who had worked to create a beautiful celebration for them. "The processed food," Robert Henderson said with sudden comprehension. "You served them exactly what they deserved." I nodded. I gave the Morrison family precisely what they requested, a traditional celebration that would reflect their authentic values. Every guest here has now witnessed exactly what this family considers appropriate hospitality when they think their reputation won't be affected by their choices. The devastating elegance of the revenge was now clear to everyone present. I had exposed the Morrison family's character, not through accusations or confrontations, but by letting them demonstrate their true nature to the very people whose opinions mattered most in Chicago's social hierarchy. Vivian made one final attempt to salvage the situation. "This is all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Maya is obviously having some kind of breakdown." "The only thing breaking down here," Margaret Thornton interrupted, "is any respect I had for this family's integrity." She turned back to me with genuine warmth. "Maya, thank you for showing us who these people really are. We won't forget this lesson." One by one, the guests began moving toward the exit, their departure creating an exodus that transformed the Morrison family's carefully planned social triumph into a spectacular public failure. As they left, several stopped to express their admiration for my composure and their disgust at how I had been treated. Derek stood frozen in the dining room, watching his family's reputation crumble around him as the most influential people in Chicago walked out of his life, carrying recipe cards that would forever remind them of this moment. "You've destroyed everything," he said finally, his voice hollow with shock. "No, Derek," I replied calmly. "I just made sure everyone could see what you had already destroyed. The only difference is that now your destruction is visible to the people whose opinions actually matter." As the last guest departed, I turned to Rosa, who had been documenting the entire evening with discreet photography. I think we have everything we need for the portfolio. The Morrison family's Thanksgiving celebration had indeed established standards for how such gatherings should be conducted. Unfortunately for them, those standards had revealed exactly what kind of people they were beneath their carefully maintained social facade. The dining room felt cavernous once the guests had departed, their abandoned place settings and untouched processed food creating a tableau of social destruction that would have been comedic if it weren't so devastating. Derek stood among the wreckage of his family's reputation, his face cycling through expressions of rage, disbelief, and dawning comprehension of the consequences he now faced. "You planned this," he said finally, his voice hollow with shock. "You knew about Celeste, about the divorce papers, about everything, and you deliberately sabotaged our family." The accusation hung in the air between us, loaded with the desperation of someone trying to reframe their victim as their victimizer. But I had lived through 4 years of Morrison family gaslighting, and I no longer felt compelled to accept responsibility for their choices. "I planned nothing, Derek," I replied calmly. "I simply gave your family exactly what you requested, a traditional celebration that would reflect your authentic values. Every element of tonight's dinner was delivered according to your specifications." Vivian finally found her voice, though it shook with fury. "You humiliated us in front of the most important people in Chicago. Do you have any idea what you've done to our reputation?" "I've done nothing to your reputation," I said, beginning to gather my purse and coat from the kitchen. "I've simply made it visible to the people who matter. Your reputation was always based on how you treated people when you thought no one important was watching." Harold Morrison, who had remained silent throughout the evening's revelations, finally spoke. "Maya, surely we can resolve this situation without destroying 4 years of family relationships. Perhaps we've all made mistakes." "Harold," I interrupted, "the only mistake I made was spending 4 years trying to earn acceptance from people who never intended to offer it. Tonight simply revealed what was always true about this family's character." Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to the threatening tone I had heard him use with service workers and subordinates. "You think you've won something here, Maya? You've destroyed your own life along with ours. No one in Chicago will hire you after tonight. Your business is finished." His threat revealed how fundamentally he misunderstood both the evening's events and their likely consequences. The guests who had witnessed his family's cruelty hadn't been disgusted with my professional competence. They had been impressed by my composure under attack and horrified by the Morrison family's calculated manipulation. "Actually, Derek," I said, pulling out my phone to show him the stream of messages that had been arriving throughout the evening, "I think you'll find that the opposite is true." The text messages spoke for themselves. Margaret Thornton had already inquired about my availability for the Arts Foundation's Spring Gala, praising my grace under pressure and unwavering professional standards. Patricia Wells had asked for my contact information to recommend me to colleagues who value authentic integrity over social pretense. 3 other guests had sent similar messages expressing their admiration and their interest in working with someone who demonstrated such composure in the face of deliberate cruelty. Derek's face darkened as he realized that his attempt to destroy my professional reputation had backfired spectacularly. The influential people he had hoped would witness my humiliation had instead witnessed his family's true character, and their reaction was exactly the opposite of what he had intended. "The prenuptial agreement," Vivian began, but I cut her off with a laugh that surprised even me. "You mean the prenuptial agreement that Derek never had me sign because he was so confident in his ability to manipulate and control me?" I asked. "The one that doesn't exist because your son was too arrogant to imagine I might ever discover his deception or develop enough backbone to fight back?" The silence that followed was deafening. The Morrison family had been so certain of their power over me that they had never bothered with legal protections against the possibility that I might someday refuse to be victimized. Rosa appeared in the doorway with a professional invoice printed on official letterhead. "Excuse me," she said with crisp efficiency, "but I need to collect payment for tonight's catering services before we complete our equipment breakdown." She handed the bill to Vivian, whose face went white as she saw the total. $15,000 for an elaborate celebration that had destroyed her family's social standing and revealed their true character to everyone who mattered in Chicago's cultural elite. "This is outrageous," Derek sputtered. "We're not paying for Maya's vindictive sabotage of our family celebration." Rose's response was delivered with the calm professionalism of someone who had dealt with difficult clients throughout her career. The invoice reflects services delivered according to the client specifications. All menu modifications were implemented based on written instructions requesting traditional American Thanksgiving fare without modern complications. Payment is due immediately, as agreed in your signed contract. The contract was legitimate, and the Morrison family's financial obligations were legally binding regardless of their satisfaction with the results. They had received exactly what they had ordered. They simply hadn't understood what their requests would actually look like when executed literally. Derek pulled out his phone, presumably to call his lawyer, but I suspect he was beginning to realize that legal action would only create more public documentation of their behavior. The last thing the Morrison family needed was a court case that would give me the opportunity to present evidence of their conspiracy under oath. "Consider tonight's bill a small down payment on the education you've received about the consequences of underestimating people," I said, moving toward the front door. "You spent months planning to destroy me financially and professionally. Instead, you've destroyed yourselves socially and revealed your true character to everyone whose opinion actually matters." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the dining room where processed foods still sat on priceless china, surrounded by abandoned place settings and the detritus of social destruction. "Derek, you were right about one thing," I said finally. "By Friday morning, this will all be behind us. The difference is that I'll be free to build a new life with people who value authenticity and integrity, while you'll be explaining to everyone in Chicago why you thought it was acceptable to orchestrate your wife's public humiliation for your own entertainment." As I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 4 years of marriage: the profound relief of finally understanding exactly where I stood and what I was worth. The Morrison family had taught me that belonging was conditional, that acceptance could be withdrawn without warning, and that love could be weaponized against the people who trusted it most deeply. Tonight, I had taught them that underestimating someone's intelligence, resilience, and professional competence could have consequences they never imagined possible. Their traditional family Thanksgiving had indeed been exactly as memorable as they had planned, just not in the way they had intended. 6 months after the Thanksgiving dinner that became legendary in Chicago social circles, I stood in the kitchen of my new Lincoln Park townhouse preparing for a celebration that would have been impossible to imagine during my Morrison family years. The space was entirely mine, purchased with the proceeds from a business that had tripled in size since influential clients witnessed my grace under pressure and uncompromising professional standards. The divorce had been finalized with surprising efficiency once Derek realized that prolonging the process would only create more opportunities for me to present evidence of his conspiracy under oath. The settlement terms were exactly what I had proposed: a clean separation with no financial obligations in either direction. Derek kept the Beacon Hill property and his family connections. I kept my business, my independence, and my self-respect. The Morrison family's social rehabilitation had proven more challenging than their legal obligations. Word of their Thanksgiving behavior had spread through Chicago's interconnected cultural and business networks with the speed and persistence of wildfire. The processed food menu had become the stuff of dinner party legend, while the revelation of their calculated cruelty had permanently altered their standing among people whose opinions actually mattered. Derek's relationship with Celeste Richmond had proceeded exactly as they had planned, though not with the triumphant social acceptance they had anticipated. Their engagement announcement in February was met with polite acknowledgement rather than enthusiastic celebration, as most of their social circle understood the timeline and circumstances of their reunion. Even among people who didn't particularly care about the morality of their behavior, the practical failure of their conspiracy had damaged Derek's reputation for competence and strategic thinking. Vivian had been forced to step down from 2 prominent charity boards when donors began questioning the organization's judgment in leadership selection. Her departure was diplomatically framed as a desire to focus on family matters, but everyone understood that her capacity to attract financial support had been permanently compromised by her association with deliberate cruelty. Meanwhile, my business had evolved beyond anything I had imagined possible during the constrained years of my marriage. The clients who had witnessed my composure during the Morrison family attack had become enthusiastic advocates for my services, recommending me to colleagues who valued substance over superficial charm. My calendar was booked solid through the following year, with a waiting list that included some of Chicago's most discerning hosts. More importantly, I had developed relationships based on mutual respect rather than conditional acceptance. The team I had built around artisan table styling included professionals who shared my commitment to authentic hospitality and genuine service. We worked with clients who appreciated excellence without demanding personal subordination, who understood that great events required collaboration rather than control. Rosa had become more than a business partner. She was a friend whose loyalty during my darkest moment had demonstrated the difference between authentic support and performative family obligation. Together, we had built something that neither of us could have achieved alone, a reputation for integrity that attracted clients who valued character over social positioning. The evening celebration was modest by Morrison family standards. 12 people gathered around my dining table for a meal that reflected my actual values rather than aspirational pretensions. The guests included Rosa and her partner Elena, my assistant Zara with her husband, Margaret Thornton and her wife Susan, Patricia Wells, and several other professionals who had become genuine friends rather than strategic connections. The menu featured dishes I had actually chosen rather than options designed to impress people I didn't particularly like. The conversation flowed naturally around topics that interested us rather than strategic networking disguised as social interaction. The atmosphere was warm and inclusive, with every guest present because I genuinely valued their company rather than their potential usefulness to my professional advancement. To Maya, Margaret Thornton said, raising her glass as we finished the main course, who taught all of us that authentic hospitality means including people because you value them, not because you need them. The toast was simple and heartfelt, exactly the kind of recognition I had craved but never received during 4 years of trying to earn Morrison family approval. Around my table sat people who knew my background, appreciated my accomplishments, and accepted my presence without requiring me to prove my worth through constant service or professional sacrifice. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself reflecting on how completely my understanding of belonging had shifted. The Morrison family had taught me that acceptance was something to be earned through endless accommodation and strategic usefulness. My current relationships had taught me that genuine belonging was something offered freely to people whose character and values aligned with your own. Derek had been wrong about one crucial element of his prediction. By Friday morning after Thanksgiving, everything had indeed been behind us. But instead of finding myself devastated and desperate, I had discovered that losing people who were incapable of authentic love was actually a profound liberation. The woman who had once tried desperately to fit into a world that was determined to reject her had learned to build her own world filled with people who chose to include her not despite her background, but because of her character. The Morrison family's elaborate lesson in conditional belonging had taught me to recognize and create unconditional acceptance.
Standing in my own kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection, I realized that their Thanksgiving gift had been more valuable than they could have imagined. They had freed me from the exhausting effort of earning love that was never going to be offered authentically, and in doing so, they had made space in my life for connections that actually nourished my soul.
The missing chair at their table had led me to discover where I actually belonged, not in their world of strategic relationships and conditional acceptance, but in a community of people who understood that the most important ingredient in any gathering is the genuine desire to share joy with people whose presence enriches your life. The Morrison family had gotten exactly the traditional Thanksgiving they deserved, and so, it turned out, had I.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.